Thanks for joining me. I'm Tyler Edlin, and today I'll take you through a city painting. This time, however, I'll have a stronger emphasis on getting an image started and ready to paint. This includes analyzing the objectives, gathering a proper reference, producing thumbnail sketches. I also go in to mention composition, tangents, and focal points. So here we go. So before we begin, let's have a look at what the client is looking for in this image. The town is reminiscent of early 1900s small European city. That there is enough room for horse-drawn carriages on the streets, that the town is split into various islands, and that the islands are connected by large bridges. And the terrain surrounding the city is mountainous. And they would also like to show the city during the spring or the fall. So now what you're seeing is the initial thumbnails I sent over to the client. And what I tried to do is offer a variety of camera angles. And at this point, I actually didn't realize it was supposed to be a floating city, so this is kind of what they got. And they liked, I think, 2 and 4, and I ended up mixing up the final angle between somewhere between them because they were more of like an establishing shot, and they showed more in the scene. So that's what I went with. And so after doing the thumbnails, then I went on and gathered some reference and did some research, and I'll kind of show you. I'll scroll through what I found, and that's how I kind of go about the next phase. And I got various photos from Brixham, Requir, Mostar, Bosnia, Arlen, Norway, Colmar, Naples, Korčula Island, Kaiserberg, Venezuela, all kinds of different places. So some of them are paintings. I mean, whatever I could to get some initial inspiration going for the picture. And this is typically how I start all my paintings. If it was up to me, I would tell you the more reference, the better. The more it'll enrich your painting and make you look more sophisticated in what you're painting. And so now what we have here is the actual sketch. I'm kind of midway working it up, and I kind of handle it in big masses and sections. And a lot of it just starts as kind of simple shapes, and then I go and throw in some random vertical lines, horizontal lines, and then I kind of form houses out of those, houses or trees. And what I do here is kind of show you what's going on in my head, how I'm thinking of things. I'll highlight the three major land masses as I see it in my head anyway at this point. And you basically got three: the foreground, the midground, and then the background. And then then there's the sky. That's part of the background. But yeah, I'm gonna be basing my values kind of based on those three sections. And yeah, and so nowadays I almost pretty much exclusively draw right within Photoshop, and just keep going at it. I like it because of the convenience. As you can see, I can just select islands or masses, just move them over, and throw in some more without having to really redraw that much. And this kind of helps me figure out the composition as I'm going. I often don't get a very crystal clear picture of the painting in my head, before I paint it. A lot of it is discovery during the process, and the same as when I am drawing. I'm just throwing down lines and kind of hoping something will work well. And eventually, after I get the basic composition established, I'll start bringing in the photo reference, as you can see here, and start upping the detail a bit on some of the buildings. And as you can see here, that it's a nice line of mansions up on that wall there, which I'm kind of drawing in there now. Still no detail, I'd say, just kind of general idea how things will go or where they will be. And of course, since this is a floating city, then I have to go and add some little airships, floating around. And of course, those positioning will probably change in the final one, but for now, I just have to remind myself that they'll be there. And what I didn't do that I probably should, because it's a good practice, because I have it in my head, is the horizon line, which is kind of right where that bridge is, where the two towers is. I have the horizon line vision about there, but I should have actually drawn it in on a layer at least and kept it there, because then it'll help keep everything in perspective. So since all my perspective at this point is pretty much guessed, I'll go back in now maybe one or times throughout the whole painting, and then I'll correct some things that by eye just doesn't look quite right to me. And so that's what I'm basically doing here. And this isn't like a grid-based city, so not all the buildings are perpendicular, and so they'll be facing all kinds of directions. But pretty much, what I'm concerned is, where they're gonna lie with the horizon line. Is it gonna be below or above? And for completely guessing, this didn't come out totally awful, uh, and that just comes from experience and a lot of work with perspective. So if you're not that familiar with 1 point, 2 point, even 3-point perspective. Just grab some books on it, or Google it, and you can start to see the fundamentals rather quickly online these days. But practice them and try different compositions with them in your pictures, and soon you'll learn it and you'll pick it up. It's not the hardest thing ever. I mean, there's certain aspects to it that are more difficult than others, but basically just it helps you block out things correctly. And so in a situation like this where I have a lot of different vanishing points for the different houses on the various streets, I'll use like a different color to kind of figure out where their vanishing point might be headed along the horizon line. And then I'll go back and correct some of the drawing. It also, complicates matters further on this one, is all these houses are at various elevations, and that'll mess with your eye too. Yes, so now what I show you here is I kind of highlight the main road or the pathway through the image, and that's kind of how I intend to guide the viewer's eye through the piece. Helps create, unity and flow. And so next what I do is I break out the rule of thirds, and so I divide the canvas into three like this, and I look at them and I figure out what is working and not working, or what's the strongest and weakest. So I think the two on the left are fine, but comparatively speaking, the panel on the right is not as strong, and so what I'm going to do is kind of work up the composition over there. See? And so on the painting where these vertical lines intersect is also one of those places, or it might be a good idea to put an area of interest to make your composition stronger. And so to focus on this area, I block out the other two sections of the painting and just worry about this. And I don't do anything drastic to it, but I do put some waterfalls in and maybe a floating ship taking off. And that'll hopefully just, increase the interest level on this panel. And that's going to kind of wrap up the initial drawing phase of this. I'll just go right on and put a multiply layer above the drawing and start figuring out the values. And I'll start blocking in the atmosphere levels. And I'm thinking, this will reference kind of back to the point where I had highlighted the three different shapes or land masses, and that's basically how I'm going to start this out. And then I can hide the drawing and you can just see what you're left back with the painting. Since this piece of art won't feature line art, it'll be just there as a guide. And just as that is, a couple minutes in, it's starting to already read like floating a landmass. And given I haven't tweaked the lighting yet, that just at this point it'll just mean things that get closer to the foreground will get darker, because there won't be going through so much atmospheric perspective. See, I kind of just fill this whole one little area here into one value, and then kind of have that fade, and then I'll just paint light right onto the sides where the buildings would hit. And this is kind of, I guess, if you're going to do speed painting, maybe like a 2-hour study or something, this is how I'd approach it the same way, just to kind of get the picture to read as soon as possible. And then, some darker areas of the trees and the mountains. And kind of what you see here is I left the white of the canvas from the layer below when I'm painting these foreground buildings, and I guess that comes from my watercolor background, and then I'm just opaquely painting the darker areas in. So it kind of makes it so I have to paint less, at least at this stage. And if you're taking an approach to this in any similar way that I'm doing here, I'd advise not to go in and add the detail on the houses right now, unless you have the lighting all planned out in your head and stuff beforehand. So what I'm doing here is basically as if I had a maquette set up, and I'm kind of studying it from life. I'm just, the houses are all very simple shapes, and I'm just trying to figure out how lighting will hit them. And if I'm doing that and adding detail at the same time, if there's any type of changes, that means there's a lot of wasted work, and you don't want that. And that's the thing too, use any type of visual aid that will help you complete an image, even if you have to make it yourself. I mean, if you have the time and the resources, and you're not quite sure how something will look, get some cardboard, get some wire, set up a little scene, and then throw light on it and study it. For me, generally, with a scene this complex, I'll figure out what type of lighting will be in the sky, and I'll just bring up imagery from the internet basically and see how lighting will hit, the direct light and the bounce light and the shadow sides of things, and try to balance it through that. Yeah, once I have the basic values in, I go in with some kind of large chalky texture brushes and block some more color in on the mountains. I kind of almost wish I kept them this simple. Like, I tend to, the more I work on something, the higher the chances that I can overwork it, but it depends the type of feeling and mood you're going for in your piece. What you want to be thinking about at this stage is the temperature of the colors you're putting down. Are these mountains going to be, or parts of them going to be in the shadow, or are they going to be getting some direct sunlight? And so that's where I'm kind of deriving these blues and purples from in the back of the mountain, and then the warmer tones on the left side where the sun will be hitting it. And whatever I can do to give the whole plane some form. At this point too, I hadn't actually I was going to make it more of a springtime image, and so then I go in and take 180 degrees and I'm going to go for a fall / maybe like early snowfall type look. And so this is it now with painted snow on the mountains, and it kind of I feel it adds a lot to the look and feel of the painting. So I had a good feeling about that, and I got it approved by the client, so I went on board. With them on board, I went on to paint snow throughout the entire scene. And even though at this elevation, realistically, there would be snow everywhere, and these types of trees would not even exist. But you gotta take some liberties once in a while, and this is imaginative realism, I guess. So yeah, you have to make it work for the fantasy-scape and the image. And so this is how I go in and block a lot of color onto like a, this walkway is kind of supposed to have one color. It's supposed to kind of be like a sienna, and then you can make it look more lively if you add some color variation to that. As you can see, there's like little bits of orange and green in there, and that just kind of helps bring it all together better, I feel anyway. And nothing's ever just one solid flat color, and you'll see that throughout the painting. That's how I handle the houses and stuff. And I'd also like to point out at this time, it really wasn't up to this point in the painting where I was 100% confident with it. Like, there'd be mornings over the 2 weeks I spent painting it where I'd wake up and like, oh, what do I got to do? And I just wasn't all there with it. But I guess after I laid in the initial color on these buildings, I was more satisfied with the overall direction of it, and then I would wake up and be like, yeah, I know exactly where this is going and what I'm going to do. And so I would have to say, even if your painting is not looking there or 100%, through many hours or days of it, stick with it, and follow your gut instinct, and maybe, it'll get there, and you'll have a new appreciation for it. There's just some painting styles or techniques that the painting just takes a little longer than others for it to look good. So just put the time in, and hopefully it will turn out in the end. This was kind of fun too with this painting. Professionally so far, I haven't had many opportunities to paint snow scenes, so this was kind of fun to have all the snow freshly brushed aside and all the crevices of the streetway. And so yeah, I try to save as much time as possible. I'll paint up one window if it's all in a line like this, a direct line, it'll be easy. Then I copy and paste it, drag it over, and maybe make subtle changes on them. It's also important too to remember when doing details on housing and stuff is to really study the architecture of the period, and that means all the various types of cross beams, and when I have that look accurate in here, as you can see, brace in each window. And then what I get to later on is, since you gotta accommodate for the weather, and in this case I paint little snow drifts and stuff that kind of would get caught in the wedges or corners of the beams. And so here's one way to approach texture in your painting. This is a photo I grabbed from cgtextures.com, and once I have like the roof's color and value established, you can just mask it out and then paste the roof or the texture right into the highlighted area, and then skew it in a perspective. And then what I usually do is run it through a filter and then kind of put it on, adjust the blending mode so it fits right in. And then I would go and paint over it. That's one kind of shortcut to digital painting. And then I believe I also show you just I think that was like the only roof I did that for. I went and I ended up painting a lot of them by hand because that's the look I prefer. But that does help, especially with some of the foreground elements that are more detailed. It does help establish some detail. can see here, I went and hand painted this entire roof, and there's just certain qualities I like to have in it over just dropping in a texture, and that's kind of some of the randomness and the color variations you can bring to it. If you start, unless it's the look you're going for, it doesn't work with my particular style anyways, but you start overlaying textures and everything, and then certain things just start looking all too uniform. I guess one of the most common questions I get asked is how long I've been doing this for, and I would say about 7 years now. It was in 2005 when I was a junior in college. I was a graphic design major at the time. I had just discovered that I guess that once I learned that you could draw on the computer, that I started to like that better than coming up with designs and stuff using a mouse and stuff. And so then I really began to pursue on my own time, how to get better at that. And ever since then, it's been, about 8 hours a day, making work for clients or, pieces for myself to improve. And really the only way to improve rapidly is to completely immerse yourself into what you're doing. So, it was, working day jobs, going to school, and then going home and running to the computer and, trying digital art. And it took a lot of time. I would take private classes at the local art museum because they really wouldn't offer in college the type of stuff I wanted to learn. So, yeah, you just got to find what you want to do and go for it. And I feel that there's many ways to obtain success in this industry, and you could generally either have a specialization and be just really, really good at this one area, or you can be so versatile you can adapt and mimic any type of style, and you can paint landscapes, characters, and vehicles, props, whatever, and you'll get work if you're good at what you're doing. Just make sure your work stands out, and that there's a market for it. But if you're gonna get into anime art and stuff like that, you better be damn good at it, because there's enough of it out there to flood the moon. So I would say don't worry about your personal style. I remember I used to a lot when I was a student and practicing all the time. I'd always just be worried how my work would look in the end. But the fact of the matter is, just keep practicing and draw from life and stuff, and through just a lot of work, vigorous work, you'll start to develop a personal style, and you'll study artists and masters that you kind of like, and you'll just pick little tidbits from everywhere, and it'll appear in your work, and then you'll start developing your own unique vision for things. So here's a point where I realized I had an awful tangent in my work, and I'll show you that in a second with this giant red line. See, I have all three elements here on the different planes kind of all lining up, and that's a tangent. And so what I have to do is make it more vertical. And so I separated them, and I'd copy and paste the different layers and then kind of expanded it as you see. And then I go on and then I corrected some of the perspective on these houses over here on the left. These are those things I just sometimes you catch later in the game rather than sooner, but it doesn't matter as long as you do find them before the piece is finished. areas such as this, which is the direct midground. If it's not directly a focal point, don't put as much detail in it as, say, the buildings in front and the foreground. If everything is detailed throughout the picture, and I mentioned this in I think one of my other videos, the whole scene, the scene as a whole will lose its impact. To get kind of like, you know, deep rich colors in your work is to, and not have them be flat, is to use lots of layers of color. And as you can see, what kind of like these background mountains are ending up looks nothing like any of the phases I previously had painted them on, and that's mainly from me not knowing exactly where I was going with it, and second, just from me adding additional layers of atmosphere in there and tweaking the lighting. And so the end result is always different than your initial steps. So yeah, mixing colors well just takes a little practice and experience, and the only way for me to that I really learned was through using oil paints and watercolors, and I did that for several years before I could adequately paint digitally. I tried to do digital first and it just wasn't working, and I could tell by looking at it that things were just bland, ugly. So like when layering the colors, as I mentioned, you gotta watch out that things don't get muddy, which is always a possibility. Finally, near the end of the painting, I go in and add some fun little ships and stuff, and to do this I kind of got some photos of model tugboats and place them in, and I start painting over them to kind of give them a unique, almost steampunkish type of flying ship look. Then I finally make one final pass on the foreground area and add in that horse-drawn carriage as originally requested. So that's about going to wrap up this painting. I won't show every little last detail I throw into the scene, but you'll see it in the final image. Thanks for viewing. I have a lot more videos coming up in the future, and what you should expect to see is some character ones, including multi-character illustrations and kind of the process I use to go about those. So thanks for viewing again. I appreciate all the feedback, so leave some comments and keep practicing.